Right, hello. I see a few people are here. Welcome to Pixelhue Playtime. I don't know how this is going to go, so we're just going to go with it today and see what happens. So I can see most people are on YouTube. So if you're in the comments, stick in what you would like, where you want it to go, and we'll go that way. Well, hey, auto tracking has turned itself on. Amazing. There's a few things that people have asked me to cover, so I'll go over those first, and then we will go and see where things go. So the first thing someone has asked me to cover is a 2:4 wide projection blend scenario. So I was going to show that in a P10 sim. Behind me I have a P20DS and a P80 and some content machines, so I can show real things as well. But the first one we're going to have to do in a sim because I don't own a P10. I'm not used to vmixing and being on screen talking at the same time, so this might be a little bit all over the place. So let's just go to which screen do we want? That screen? No, we want the other screen. Let's go to a screen. Let me just plop myself in the bottom corner. I'll just plop myself down here. Right. So P10 simulator type thing. So if you don't know how to do simulation projects, add new project. I'm just going to leave it as whatever name. Add a device, and I'm going to add a P10. So what's been asked here essentially is they want to do 2 sets of 4 projector blends. So 8 projectors in 2 sets of 4. And the question is how would you do that using Pixelhue? So you could either do this in a Q8, or you could stack 2 switches. So they're not particularly frame sensitive. When I asked the question, does it matter about an extra frame or 2 of latency? They said no. So we should, there we go. So you double click to enter the device. And then in here, basically, we've got some settings. So to do a 4 wide blend in the P10, so the P10 is the only one that you can get 8 outputs out of without being a Q8. I'll explain why specifically that's important. But basically in here, you need to set this to single link mode. So rather than just a 4K and a 4K, we now have 4 single link and then 4 single link, so 4 1080p's. And what we also need to do is we need to change our working mode to program only. So yep. And yep, that's good. Why does it kick me out? Well, this is embarrassing. I'll just keep waiting for this simulator to load. There we go. Right, so I'll load this up. And it doesn't look like it's saved those settings. Right, oh no, program only mode. Right, there we go. And then I need to change it to single link. Should have done it the other way around. So basically, this now gives us 8 possible connectors that we can actually use in a blend. So we could actually have an 8 wide blend, but the specific use case here is 2:4. So what I'll do is I'll just go into the. So let me explain why this is the case here. So in program only mode, these copies become a second output, so that gives us double the capacity. And the P10 is either 4K on 1 connector or 4 single links over the 4 connectors. So by going single link and program only mode, we get the 8 connectors. But obviously we lose the preview. Now when it comes to the screen, you can see I have all 8 connectors available across the bottom, and I'm obviously hiding one of them for you guys on the stream. So what I can now do is I can just add them in. Inconsistent connector types or capacities. Screen, not an aux. So yeah, so I can add these in, and I can add. So for my first screen, I'm just going to do 4 wired, and there's a little thing up the top here which will tidily just put them in line. And then I'm going to add a second screen and add my other 4 connectors to that. And which one don't I have? Don't have that one. And do the 4 again. Okay, so where I've just dumped them on, they are not in the right order. Obviously, if you were doing this real, you'd put them in the right order, and you can change that. And then to do a blend, let's go to the first screen. You need to go to Advanced, turn on the edge blending mode, leave it in Basic, and then you select your edges. They go blue. So we're going to select all of the edges within the blend. Set your blending width. So 600, I think, is what they said it would be. It's a pretty standard thing. And that's it. That's our blend. So we could do this on a P20 if we only had 1 4, or if we had 2 that were duplicated, because there's 2 sets of connectors on the P20 and the P20DS. But they've got a left and a right 4 projector blend on each side. So that's their scenario. This is how you do the blend. You can do the same for the second screen. So enable the edge blending, leave it in basic mode, select your edges, and then set your blend width. Whether they want to do feathering, it's up to them, whether they do it in the P10 or whether they do it in projector. Cool. What's interesting here is obviously our device now gives us our total canvas size. But what we can do is we can change. So because it's 5,000 wide, it's over 4,000 wide. Anything over 4,000 wide within the Pixelhue range of switches needs to be a 4K capacity. That affects the P10, the P20. The P80 has 4K everywhere, and the Q8 is 4K everywhere. So this is really a P10 specific, P20 specific bit of knowledge. But leave it as 4K, and then clicking on the connector itself, we can go over to the EDID, and we can set it to custom, and I think it was 5880 by 1080. And then we can change that to 50 or 60. Can leave it as reduced blanking, that's fine. So that is how we would get our signal in. So if we now go to our programming window, we can now see that we've got an EDID over here on that connector. We can drag it on to our screen, and we can set it to 1:1, put it in top left corner, or fill entire screen. It makes no difference if it's 1:1 and it's the same size as the canvas. It just fills the screen, right? So that's how you would do it, and you would do a second connector for the other ones. You'd have a left and right, I guess, and that's how you would get around this limitation. If they were both the same screen, so left and right were the same, you could actually do this in a P20DS. It would max out the P20DS because the way that the P20 works, essentially, if you've got a 4K block here, a 4K block here, but each 4K block can be set into dual link mode, which gives you a dual link and a dual link, and then each one of those sub blocks has 2 outputs. So, for instance, we can just go into this one. I think I've already got 4 screens set up, but we can delete those screens. Have one screen with 4 connectors. Let's drag these on. Not enough resources to complete this action. Interesting. think I found a bug in the latest firmware. But you can see where we would go with this. We would add that fourth connector, enable blending the same way as previous, so edge blending basic, select those things, do the blend width, etc. The reason why you'd be able to do it on the P20 is because these two connectors clone each other. So you could have this one going to your left projector, blend 1, this right projector blend 2, left 2, right 2, left 3, right 3, left 4, right 4. So that's how it would be possible. And then any other screens you would have to do on AUXes, which have slightly less features. So that's how you could do it. And obviously, if you're in a Q8, you could do an 8 wide blend, because you can. As long as you've got 2 output cards, you could do an 8 wide blend. It would be a massive waste of resources because everything is 4K within the Q8. So layers are 4K, connectors are 4K, everything is 4K. So I hope that answers anyone's questions on this specific use case that someone has asked me about. Cool. The other thing someone has asked me about is about audio and how that works. So I have on this P20, I have a Mac that's gone to sleep. So it should liven up. These connectors will go green when it's a live source. So there we go, it's on 3 and 4. Yeah, so if I now go to programming, I should remove those screens actually. Yes. Yes. Go back to programming. So I just have QLab running on this Mac, playing back some content. It was a minute ago. We'll move on. In terms of how to get audio from this device, so the first thing is one of the connectors from this device, because it's got two cables going into the switcher, one of them needs to have an EDID with the audio set. So you set that here, and this only applies to the P20 DS, the P80, and the Q8. The P10 and the P20 don't have audio yet. So you need to enable audio on one of the EDIDs. I only recommend doing it on one, because if you do it on 2, on the P20, you'll have 2 devices with the same name appear in some lists. So just do it on one connector, and then you only have one with the same name, which is ideal. So yeah, so I've got it coming in on input 4 here, and then if we jump over to QLab, so where's my source for QLab? 220. If we quickly jump over to here, this might take me a little bit to get this set up. Right, there's my mouse. What you'll see is it will appear in the list of devices. I've got a bit of a lag because I'm watching a screen that's quite a few frames behind. Let's get a little bit more. So yeah, so if you know how to patch the audio, this is where you'd patch the audio in QLab. So what will happen is the devices will appear in this list. If I can get the mouse to the right place. So yeah, so you can see it there, HDMI out, HDMI 2 out. So on the P20 DS, the audio is all stereo. That is just how it is. So yeah, so we can click OK to this. All done. And then if we send this queue off, great. So if I quickly jump back to the programming. So yeah, we should be seeing some content being played. Yep, on the Mac extended, just in here. So the thumbnail for now. And then this will have audio. So I can't remember which one it was on, but yeah, inputs here. If we expand them out, I think it was 4. You can see this little green dot here. That shows that audio is coming in. And then if we want to patch that to the Dante, we expand the Dante out. So you can see here I've got it patched to Dante 7 and 8. This is the same sort of thing. If you're used to Dante patching, this is the same kind of thing. And if I go to Dante controller, I can load up my P20 and we can look at the transmit channels, and you can see that 7 and 8 have audio active on them. And obviously you can patch this in the same way you patch any other Dante devices in the routing table. So that's how you get audio from a source through the system to Dante. You can also patch it directly to an output if you wanted to. There's lots of different routing options available. There is also on the back, if we look here, there is also some audio jacks, 2 ins, 2 outs, stereo on both, line level. And you'll find those over here in the audio section as well. So you can use it as a extra Dante I/O if you really wanted to. But that's how you do audio. Coming back the other way, you'd select your Dante input, I guess, and then patch it to your outputs. On the P20DS, only the outputs have audio, not the auxes, not the multi-view. So only this block of outputs here. And if it is a SMPTE format, it will clone itself to the SDI outputs, but only if it's a SMPTE format. Okay, so let's just have a quick look at the YouTube comments and questions. Right, in terms of Pixelhue versus E2, does the Pixelhue talk better with Mac devices for custom mediums? Absolutely. So we can do a live demo on this. So we've got a Mac. It's currently got a. Well, let's have a look. We've currently got a 7680 by 1080 EDID. I have got nothing specifically running on these Macs. No better display, no SwitchRes X. I don't use it. I refuse to use it. It just doesn't work anymore. As long as it is a format that it will accept, then yes, the Pixelhue and the Macs will talk to each other very nicely. And let's go out and do a live demo. So let's say we wanted to reduce this from 7680 to 4560. We should be able to press apply. It will go away, re-handshake. The Mac is likely to ask me a question. I think it wants to know whether it's an extended display. It's not asked me anything yet. We can go back over here. So yeah, so you can see that the Mac is now sending 4560 by 1080. So it is that simple. Anything up to 4K has always been fine across all the brands, all the brand switches. 4K to 8K is a tricky region. So depending on which series of M, so I'm only going to talk about M series Macs. So M1s have a sort of hard-coded limit of 6,144 pixels, but the M4s, the M4 base model and up, will do up to 8192 wide. I don't know if in this specific firmware I'm running, they fixed a bug. There was a bug where 8192 didn't work for Mac. The prior version it did. So 1.6.2 firmware did work. 1.7.1 I think broke it. I don't know if the next firmware will fix that issue, but I expect it to. But up to 7680 will just work. And it is possible to do up to 8192 into the P80 and the Q8. It's only the P20, P10 that have the problem where it, on the latest firmware 1.7.1, it sort of gets to 7680, and then from 7680 to 8192 doesn't quite work. But they're aware of it, and they said they would fix it. So in terms of how does it work, it works. There is also a additional feature which I have not been able to get working because I don't have the right dongles, where you can do Mosaic from a Mac. So what this is essentially in the edit. Down here is you set up a mosaic group, and then you set one connector to be a left, one connector to be a right, and then you connect them both to a Mac. And what you will have is you'll have a left half and a right half come out of the Mac. The Mac will see it as one screen, but Pixelhue will see it as a left and a right half, and then you need to stitch them back together on 2 layers. So there is that additional thing. I haven't managed to get it working because I don't have the right dongles. It's dongle specific as well as OS version specific, and there's quite a lot of nuance to how it works. Some guys over in the US use it, but you need to be punching more than a 4K pixel space. So up to 8,000 wide by 1,000, or anything smaller than that, so up to 6,000 by like 1,800, you don't need to use it. If you do use it, there's only certain resolutions that work with it as well. So there's a whole document on how it works and stuff. But just it's there. If you're comparing it against an E2, E2 will not do mosaic mode in the same way. It can't do this DisplayPort tiling. Doesn't work. Yeah. Thinking basic, say 3200 by 1200 input res. So yeah, so 3200 by 1200 would be absolutely comfortable. So I can just go edit. So 3200 by 1200. I don't know which frame rate you want it at, but let's look in this list. So this list is adaptive. It will change depending on what's available. So I can go up to 120. I've never run a 120 source into a Pixelhue yet, not needed to, but let's see if it works. So set successfully. We'll go back to programming. The Mac might take a little while to do a 120 source, and it has refused at 120. So let's go back. Let's do a more sensible rate. So the most likely, if you're US, obviously 60 is quite likely. If you're UK, I would assume 50, although I do some UK gigs at 60. So let's go there now. So we'll just wait for it to finish up. So it has not taken that on its first attempt. So we just go back. Make sure I've got this right. So 3200 by 1200, 60. Change it to standard. That won't work. So we can change it to a different reduced blanking. See if we can force it through. So that didn't work either. So let's go back and let's just go. Reduced blanking version 1 is normally the one that Macs like. Audio on. It's possible the Mac sees this, but it's in the list and it just hasn't chosen it. So let's just have a look, see what happens this time. So it has not seen it yet. So let me just jump into the Mac. So let me just change my displays over first. This lag is going to kill me. Let's make that main display. And then let me just go back over here. Change this one. I'm using the Pixelhue as a KVM to access this. So let me just jump back to this. That's not ideal. Let's just see if it's in the list. So no. So that resolution didn't work out of the box into this M4 Mac, which is a little bit surprising actually. I would have thought it would have just worked. I will try a MacBook Pro M1 and see if that works and get back to you on that, or if I'm doing something wrong, because it should just work. It could be that I've got the input set to 4K and it would rather it be set to dual link. So we can try that as well. I've been trying. So to change the capacity of this block, you click on the block, and then up here you've got a dual link or a 4K. This is specific to the P10, the P20, the P20DS, the P80, and the Q8 or 4K everywhere all the time. But that sometimes that's you want to keep it the lower one of the two because you get twice as many layers. Layering is dynamic within Pixelhue, so okay, so it's defaulted back to 4K again. So let me just see what it's up to here. Let's go to the Mac. Yeah, for some reason it does not like that specific resolution. There will be ways of making that work in terms of EDID files and stuff, because you can drop in an EDID file as well down here. But I've got a feeling that is a bug in the software that I'm using. So I've got 1.7.1 on the box, and I'm using 2.0 beta Pixelflow. So that could be what is going on there, but I will definitely check on that and get back to you. So that was 3,200 times by 1,200. Okay, I'm going to move on. So wish Analog Way uses square patching as well, or had it in the option. Yeah. So does it pull naming from controller or push to controller? Well, when you say naming, what names do you mean? Because there's multiple different names throughout the system. So in terms of like EDID naming, on the P20, the EDID name is just like DisplayPort 1.2 or HDMI 2.0, and they all appear to the client device as the same name. So on the P80, however, and I think this might be coming to everything soon. So on the P80, in the EDID properties, you can set the name of the monitor, and that will go through to Windows and Mac. And in their list of displays, each display has a different name as part of that EDID. So when you come to deciding which screen does what, you can do that, and that becomes important when you start doing mosaic on, wider than 4K, wider than 8K, wider than one connector. When you need to stitch connectors together, that becomes quite important. So in terms of naming of EDIDs, yes, in the P80, the Q8, no in P20, P10, P20DS. In terms of naming throughout the system, let me jump back to the P20. So each input block, each connector has a name, I should say. So for instance, this connector, you have a name here, and this name follows through. So if I quickly show you what the multi-view looks like, I don't know if you can see it, it's probably a little bit crushed on these on this particular thing. Maybe I can I zoom in on? Yeah, I can zoom in on a layer. Boom. Nope, let's go to the main. Let's zoom right in. So you can probably see down at the bottom that name Mac. So that is essentially what happens. Let's go back there. That gone full screen? Yeah. So that's what happens when you change a connector name. So I think I've got it here, set to Mac. So that name will follow through to the multi-view. And in terms of the programming, which is where you drag sources to layer, it is also there. So that's the same across. That's the same across all of the range. The only one that's a bit different is the P80, the Q8, where you can have different EDID names to input names. And obviously on the P20, P10, the input name and EDID names don't match ever. Well, unless you change all of your inputs to say HDMI 2.0 or DisplayPort 1.2. So I hope that answers your question about naming. If it doesn't, let me know. Yes, the Mac resolution for the Mac Mosaic is, yeah, it relies on specific adapters. So basically, it uses DisplayPort tiling underneath, and Mac OS only has DisplayPort tiling enabled for certain size of screens that the Mac OS support. So like their 6K wide display, which is in a 2:1 ratio, that is one of the resolutions that will work on a left-right combination because it's one that Apple use as part of their screens. But you need to have the right dongles to make that work. In terms of companion control presets, is it in line with the E2 module or better? So, first of all, presets are better than an E2 in some ways. So, for instance, if I was going to go make some presets up here, I could have, I can just add a preset. I can make it complete or relative. When you choose relative, you choose which layers you want to include, whether you want to take it from preview or program, and then you choose a name where you want to store it. This is very analog way. You can choose whether you want to include the duration time as part of your thing, which screens you want to include. I don't know what this does exactly, but you can include the input effects. So there's some stuff that you can do on inputs and on layers and stuff as well. So yeah, you can store it as a preset, and then you could have another preset and store that as a preset. So add another preset, store it in 2. So I've got a preset 1, preset 2. In terms of how this works with Companion, let's go into Companion. Can you see it? Yeah, great. So in terms of like buttons, I can just go here, presets. I think this is the one I had. Yeah. Pull a preset, global preset 1, preset 2, and then Companion works the same way as you'd expect it to. There is a lot more presets in terms of what's available for buttons. There is quite a lot. Let's see, Pixel. There is quite a lot, and the developer team. I should say this is the open source Companion. There is actually 2 Companion that you could go with. So there's Companion that runs on the box, and there's Companion as part of the standard BitFocus Companion, the normal one that everyone uses. The guys who developed this are separate from Pixelhue. They're open source. These guys are quite responsive. They've logged in a couple of times to my boxes, done remote stuff, just to make sure things are working. So in general, most of the stuff, if not all of the stuff that's available via the API, is implemented in the BitFocus Companion module. There is certainly, you can go back different versions. There's quite a lot of different versions. I don't know if I can go all stable and beta. Yeah, there is more versions. There is quite a lot of versions going back. Comparing it to an E2, obviously with the E2 you've got the XML feature. So if you know how to use XML coding, it's quite powerful. But obviously you can get yourself into a lot of trouble with XML coding if you don't do it exactly in the right way. So swings and roundabouts. In terms of delivering shows, I've done a number of shows on Pixelhue, my own and other people's Pixelhues, and I haven't found anything missing. So standard corporate shows, a couple of award shows, a couple of medical conferences. I haven't found anything specifically missing in terms of from Companion. And I normally trigger, I'll normally trigger QLab Companion at the same time. Sorry, QLab and Switcher at the same time. That's whether I'm using Barco, Analog Way, or Pixelhue, or a Constellation, or a Roland. I try and keep it all nice and tight on one button press. So I don't think there's anything specifically missing. There is a few features that people have asked for. So on the P80, there's an SDI matrix internally. The developers have coded up the buttons to take source to SDI, source to SDI. That hasn't been implemented yet. That's missing, but that's going to be added at some point soon, I guess. So yes, I would say it's probably on par with the Barco in terms of companion modules. I've not really found anything missing from either of them, to be perfectly honest. Same with the Analog Way. The Analog Way module is pretty robust. I haven't really found anything missing from that. Obviously, there's a few things in the Analog Way module that you have to do like custom codes for, like backup input switching. I don't think they've got the backup input switching working on this. I could be wrong. I could be very wrong. I don't know. Let's have a look. So backup. No, they have. Pixelhue, switch input to backup. So you choose your input and then you choose your input backup. So yes, they have implemented that as well. So that's pretty cool. I guess they're a step ahead on Analog Way in that context. But yeah. So naming things, talking about Dante. Okay, so in terms of naming things within Dante, you can always rename your channels from your devices. So it would help if you could see my screen. I think. Can you see my screen? Yep, I'm just looking at the wrong window. So yeah, you can always rename your channels in Dante Controller. You've always been able to do that. That's the same in Analog Way. You can rename them from the controller, but you can also do it in Analog Way from Live Premiere, from an Aquilon. I don't think you can rename the channels in here. No. So that's not possible. Hi Phil, other Phil, welcome. Thank you, very helpful. How often are Pixelhue making updates and adapting, resolving any issues found? Okay, hot topic. So, 1.6.2 was released 8-9 months ago. That was sort of a long-term stable for a while. Then in October we had 1.7.1, which enabled quite a few more features, quite a few bug fixes, changed the UI quite a bit, and then there was 1.8. Sorry, there was 1.8 that was released sort of before Christmas, over Christmas. So they're pretty good in terms of like updates, in terms of like resolving things. They're pretty good at that. They're quite responsive in terms of like, I found a bug, here's my bug, here's how I replicate it, here's what you do. So they seem pretty good at that kind of stuff. In terms of like feature releases, there's a lot more features that people want than they've got time to develop. So the community, the WhatsApp community, is pretty active in terms of like jumping on Pixelhue to do more and more and more with their products, and they do respond quite well to the criticism, critique, and hey, can we add this feature? It's not normally a no. It's normally a we'll add it to the roadmap. And the roadmap is quite long, so yeah, they're okay. I would suggest they're pretty good. In terms of like new features, obviously the P80 came out 6 months ago now, and it has had one major firmware release that enabled some features, enabled the audio, for instance, and then the latest release that's still in beta releases the live backgrounds and keyframing. And I've done another video on that that's on YouTube, because they've just released the beta to the public. However, the public is if you're in the WhatsApp group that has access to the beta. So on the website they're on 1.9, which has some wrap up fixes for stuff mostly to do with the Q8. But the naming is quite all over the place. So the version control is quite all over the place. So although I say Pixelhue 2.0, I really mean Pixelflow 2.0. The numbers for Pixelflow and the Q8 are in line, but the P8, for instance, the one I've got behind me is running 1.1.2, I think, or it might be 1.2 firmware. So it's not the same firmware. The P20 is running 1.7.1. So the firmware for the P20 didn't get an update when the Q8 and the P80 got an update. So they don't all follow the same numbering scheme as they get firmware releases in terms of features and stuff. I have been told there's stuff coming for the P10, P20, P20DS, but it's not public at the moment. There's no time frame on it, and obviously the P80 is going to get a few more updates very rapidly, along with the Q8. The Q8 is getting updates pretty regularly. I'd say probably every 3 months there's an update of a new feature or something like that. So that's pretty good. They've got some new cards coming. So at the moment, all of the cards are 4K. There will be some 8K cards coming, specifically to the Q8. Obviously, the P80 can take a Q8 card in the top slot. So potentially, in a very few future firmware releases, we will see 8K native inputs on the P80. But when that will be, I don't know. But that's the direction of things going. So yeah, they're pretty responsive to features and bugs and stuff like that. Obviously, they are new to the market, so they are rapidly releasing to get on top of stuff. Is there any reason to use the onboard companion over the external? I can give you reasons to use the external versus the onboard, but I can't give you a reason to use the onboard versus external. I've heard some people say that it's quicker in terms of take and like feedback and stuff, but I've not noticed the external one being slow. I've not noticed it being laggy. I've not noticed the feedback being particularly off. So I just use the external one, and a lot of other people use the external one as well. I don't know anyone in the UK that's using the internal one. Everyone seems to be using the external one. The other thing is, obviously, the external one is a version behind, so it's a 3.0 companion release, not a 4-point-something companion release. And there are modules now that are being released that don't work back with Companion 3. So I think QLab 5 was one of those modules that meant it didn't work for me, but I couldn't. Don't quote me on that. Can't rename Dante, but don't. So no. So this is Dan's question about the Dante channels. The naming of the input channels does not follow across. So this is a this is the same actually on quite a few different quite a few different video switches. You can name them separately, but it doesn't necessarily always update and follow across. So in Analog Way, it doesn't follow across unless you force it to. The same here, except in Analog Way you can do it from the live prem software, the web GUI. From Pixelhue you can't. You have to do it in Dante controller. Yeah, there is. Where is it here? You can see the names here and rename them if you wanted to. And if you rename them here, it should follow across. So channel 4, I just made to G. Let's go to Dante controller, P20. Yeah. So if you rename them in this specific area, it will follow across. And does that follow across to the matrix? Let's get rid of these. What channel did I do? Yeah, so the Dante inputs you can label, but the outputs you can't label. Inputs to the box you can label. So inputs to the Pixelhue you can label in here. Probably can you label the TX as well? That's right, TH. Jump back to there. Yep, you can do those as well. So you have to do it from the device view, and then you click on the Dante buttons, not the buttons, the Dante ports, and then you go TX and RX. So yes, you can do it actually, Dan, but you can't do it from this page, which is where you're probably going to hang out if you're doing audio stuff within Pixelhue. So, quicker than the E3 team. So that's good to know. Does Pixelhue support keying and the ability to add alpha mask layer on top of, for example, a 69 camera pip to create a custom camera mask shape? Oh, this is such a good question. This is a really good question. So, yes, 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 and yes. So let me just show you. Let me jump to the P80. Let's go programming. So I have a bit of green screen content coming in. It's not particularly great green screen content. It's highly compressed. But what I can do is I can drag it on. I don't want to do that. Drag it on to a space where it's not in a layer, so it creates a new layer. Drag it over the top of some content. And then in my downstream key, I can enable my keying and choose what I want. So that's how you do it from the software. The software does not apply the key in the web GUI or in the PixelFlow software. But if I now show you the P80 output, which is this one. So if I show you the P80 output, if I layer 3, layer 1, layer 2, let's get rid of layer 2, let's go to layer 3. Let me just clear all layers for a second. So if I add a background on, let me just throw this on for a second. And if I add another layer with my green screen on, there we go, you can see it now. So this is without the downstream key being applied. If I quickly go over and then just click the downstream on, this is in smart mode, it should disappear. If I change it to chroma, actually let me come back to the, so you can see what I'm doing. If I go downstream key, change it from smart to chroma, and then here I get a pick button, and I can pick the green where I want, and then press apply. So you can now see that it's got rid of all my green in here. This is new, so in the old software it didn't remove it in the preview. Now it does, which is great. And then if I show you what that looks like, so you should now see a tiger in the middle of that screen. As I say, this is not particularly great green screen content, but that's how you do it. So that's chroma. Does it support luma keying? Absolutely. So if I come back here, if I pick the luma key, you can tell it where to clip. It's probably not going to do a very good job, to be perfectly honest, with the content. So yeah, I have done luma keying for lower thirds. It does work. Can you do a key and a fill? Yes. So you can bring in two inputs, and if I quickly go here, so you have to turn downstream key off to do key and fill. You go to advanced, or cut and fill, I should say. And then in here you would choose your input from another input source. I haven't got a second SDI cable hooked up at the moment. If you want to see that specifically, I can show you how to do that, and we can run vMix on a box, throw in a lower third using key and fill or luma key, and we can use that as an overlay. That's fine. In terms of masking on top, for example, of a 16:9 camera pip, so on top, yes, you can use a layer to do that in the P80. In the P20, you can't put a still image over the top, but in the P80 and the Q8, you can. In the across the range, you can. Well, actually, no, that's not true. On the P80 and the Q8, you can, for instance, take a circle shape, or you can upload a graphic cutout, with a PNG with black and white or whatever, and you can apply that to it. So you can see now this is now updated to be just that key and fill with like an alphard, or I don't really know what the right word is, but you've got a map applied to an input. So you've got a key and a fill coming in, or a key and a fill using a image. So you can cut a camera down and have that on your screen. So for instance, the Coldplay concerts I think used this kind of thing. They were doing it in disguise, obviously, but that's how you can do it. Yes, if you wanted to do an overlay over the top, you can add an image. So for instance, I can add this to a layer, bring that over the top, and then I can use a cut and fill, and I should be able to cut and fill against its own source. So like that. And that's how you could do some stuff. You can also invert the colors. So for instance, like this. So I guess what you're asking about is if we were doing like projection mapped content and you wanted to put a mask over the top of stuff. Yes, you can do that, and that's how you would do it. One really important thing to remember or to know about the way that Pixelhue, Pixelflow works, the topmost layer is not necessarily the highest layer up in this order here. So down the bottom there is actually layer forward, layer back. So for instance, I can send that, the one we've just put over the top, the one that's got the black, send it all the way to the back. It's now behind everything else, but it's still layer 3. So there is no way currently to view the order of these layers in Pixelhue, Pixelflow. So it's a thing I've asked them to fix because this is super annoying. But yes, you can bring something to the front and have it essentially view through, and it will be based on the transparency that you create using keyfill. I hope that answers your question. Reminds me of a user. Yeah, cool. So yeah, so there's loads of stuff here in terms of how that works. In terms of resource management, the layers in the P20 and the P80, certain things require extra layers. So for instance, this one here where we've used the cut and fill or key and fill, they use twice as many resources. So we have actually chewed through 2 layers to put that layer over the top. So it's not the most efficient use of resources, but obviously if that's what you need to do, that's what you need to do. Yeah. So, any other questions for the time being, guys? I think I've gone through quite a lot of those questions. I hope the answers are good. Bum, bum. Just checking this, see if I've missed any. Okay, is there any rotation options? No. Not on anything other than the Q8, and the Q8 has it only on the output. So that is that's that, I guess. However, there are, as Chris knows, there are some options that are available. So let me just get rid of this. If I go back to my input, I can, for instance, flip an input. So there are some, so I can flip it like that. So I can have my two tigers, I guess these are, coming towards each other. So yes, you can do a flip, but there is no rotation as such. You can flip like this 180, flip horizontally then vertically. I guess that gets you on 180. So yeah, flip horizontally and then vertically. Yeah, it gets you on 180. So you can do that, but that's it. It's not really a rotation. It's a double flip. Yeah, the Q8 does have rotation only on its outputs, so we can go to Sim. I don't own a Q8, unfortunately. So if you're ever in the Sim and you want to, hang on. And you need to know how about cards and stuff, you can change your cards down the bottom. So there is this card coming very soon. Well, it exists, but it's limited to 4K per connector for the time being, but it will have DisplayPort 1.4, so it will support 8K over that in a future firmware release. Word on the street is version 2.2. We're currently in the beta for version 2, so it'll be a while before 8K is available. But that's where it is, and this is where you change your output slots to different cards as well. There is 2110 on the input and output now, so yes, that's available. We'll just start this up, and I'll show you where rotation is. It's only available on the output, so you can't do anything on layers. It's only on the outputs. Okay, while I'm waiting for that, are there any limits how big an output or canvas can be? Right, no. Well, yes and no. Canvas, no. Output, yes. So output connectors set their, each connector's output has a capacity limit, right? So on the P10 you've got single link and 4K. So they are the same pixels, but so single link essentially is 1080p. And 4K is UHD. However, within Pixelhue, a 4K connector can go up to 8,192 wide, up to 7,680 tall. So when you're doing super wide or super tall, that's the capacity limit. And obviously, as long as you're within the bandwidth of a 4K connector, that's your connector limit. You can stack multiple connectors side by side and have a canvas that spans them. So actually, let's go into the P20, and I'll show you how this works in terms of a screen, building a screen. So I'm just going to leave them as 1080 for the time being. A caveat here is that within this block, this processing block, when we set it earlier to dual link or 4K, it affects both sides. So when it's 4K, it's all one block. When it's dual link, you have the left and the right half of the block, each with two connectors that are duplicated. So that's that. Right, go back to the screen. Within that block, they must both have the same output format on the connector. That means they're in time when they leave. So if you're banging it to an LED wall, it means that your first pixel on each connector is exactly in time with each other, which is really important. So, so I'm going a bit croaky. So in terms of canvas and connectors, so these two connectors currently are limited to 1080p. I can put them next to each other, and it will snap to each other. And if I was to go to my programming tab, you'll see that I have, you know, a left half, right half of my screen. So I can move stuff around, put it over the middle. That's all good, right? In terms of what I can also do, I can also leave a gap. So I can drag this over, leave a gap here, go back to my programming. You'll see that my grey zones, when they appear, you've got this grey zone, which is one connector. This grey zone here is another connector. And I can put stuff over the gap. It doesn't use any extra processing in the gap. Only the space that has connector space is actually processed. So you can do virtual pixeling. So there is a thing called virtual pixels. It's in here, advanced virtual pixels. Essentially, your total canvas size can be bigger than your connectors require, and that's how you would do it. There's a nuance to how this works. So for instance, if I grab this Mac input source here, if I tell it to fill the entire screen and it's only over one connector, it will only fill that connector. If I put it over both connectors, it will fill, you know, a rectangle that contains all of those connectors. So you can also, you don't have to have them in line. So for instance, I can move this one up like so. And when I go back here, if I put it over both and then tell it to fill, it will fill the whole rectangle. But all of this space that doesn't have a connector is just not processed. Whoa! Auto tracking has decided to zoom in on my face. Okie dokie. So yes, that's how you do that. So in terms of limit of canvas, not really. In terms of limit on connectors, yes, it's the capacity of the connectors. You also have input capacity limits on your input connectors, which is the connector limit. So it's maximum 8,192 wide for a 4K by maximum 7,680 tall for a 4K. Dual link within the system, so this applies to P10, P20. Dual link has a maximum width of 3840 No, sorry, that's not right. It's 4,001. It's 4,096 is the limit for a dual link width, and it has a height limit as well, but I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. They're the two. They're the two limits that you need to know in the Pixelhue world for the time being. Can you crop on input? Yes, you can crop. So there is multiple crops in multiple different ways, depending on what you want to achieve. So let's jump to. I was answering a question about rotation before I got. Let's jump back to the rotation question. So in the simulator, Q8 is the only one that supports rotation, and it only supports them on the output. So I'm going to turn this tracking off. It's driving me nuts. I don't know how it's managed to turn itself on. Right, zoom out. Right, there we go. Right, so yes, the Q8 supports rotation. So if we create a screen with a connector in the advanced bit, you can enable rotation, and you can rotate it by 90, 270, 180. So you can rotate your connectors. So I can, for instance, have a screen, for instance, like this. So you might be doing some IMAG in the vertical orientation where you've got some projectors, and then you've got a projector, a blend that's maybe too wide in the middle. And then if we go over to the side, there's a button up here to fill. There we go, have the whole thing. And then, for instance, I can take my fourth connector, and I can rotate that by 90 as well. Let's stick that over this side, just over there somewhere. Let's have a look what that looks like. Fill the entire screen like this. And then I can, from my programming page, again, throw a source. I need to unlock it. Throw a source over my entire canvas, including the rotated elements. So on the Q8, that is possible. That is the only box within the Pixelhue range that supports rotation, and that's the only way in which it supports the rotation. Okay, right, blah, 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 blah. Can you crop an input? Right, so on the P80 and the Cube 8, there is, it's different to the P10, P20. Let's put it that way to start with. So in my programming tab, I can grab an input. This is P80 and Q8. I can grab an input, for instance, this one. Let's do the one at the top actually. Let's do this one. I can grab here and go crop. This is also where you can grab a still if you want to. Go crop. It'll ask me where I want to crop, so I'm just going to eyeball it and say left half, and I'm going to call it left half. And what it will do is it will create me a virtual input. So underneath here, there's another virtual input, and that input now is only the left half of that image. So the P80 and the Q8 support this. This is input source cropping, so it creates like a virtual input. There is also masking, which is a type of crop. So you can enable a mask, and for instance, I can take the left half of my image out. The mask never changes the layer size. It just essentially applies an alpha over the zone that you don't want. So again, I've used this specifically for lower thirds. So if I'm using lower thirds at 16:9 coming in over an SDI, I will always mask the top half. So if the key or the fill ever goes wonk, at least it will only go wonk across the bottom of my output, because I normally leave them on if I'm doing it in that way, usually on an overlay. So that input masking is a type of crop, but it doesn't change the layer size. On the P10 and P20, there is another way of doing cropping on inputs. You do not have the availability to do a crop and create a virtual input. But I can, for instance, grab a source, and then in advanced, there should be an input source crop. So in here, why is that? Why can't I do that? Let's grab a different source for a second. Ah, right, my Mac's gone to sleep. That'd be why. Let's just wait for it to wake up. There we go. So now it's available. I can crop, and you have to do your width and height first, and then you can do the X and Y. So it's a bit backwards, but this is how you would do it. It does not change your layer size, but it changes your source size. So my scaling now has gone a bit funny, so I need to come back to basic and apply my aspect ratio to be 1:1, and it will change it to my cropped size. So there is a crop in that way as well. And obviously you can do a crop and then apply a mask if you want to. So there is an option of doing both of those at the same time. But yes, there's two different ways and two different halves of the product lineup. Thanks for sharing all this. You are welcome. Great. Will this be available for on-demand viewing once it's over? Yes. I will leave it up. I guess I'll leave it up. Why not? Why not leave it up? Yeah. So, yeah. Right. Other things I wanted to show were the live backgrounds. So I've done a video on this, but there's nothing like a real-world demo to keep me keep me on my toes. So the P80, oh, where have we gone? The P80 has live backgrounds now. Is there layer cropping as well? No. So on the Q8 and the P80, there is no layer source crop. Or sorry, there is no input source crop on a layer. You have to create an input using the source, using a crop. So in the P80 and the Q8, it moves over to the input, creating virtual inputs, and on the P10, it's within that layer settings. Yeah. And there is some nuance around this as well. So even if you create a virtual input that's cropped on the P80 and the Q8, you can't add the cropped source to the multi-viewer. So the multi-viewer only has the full source. Yeah. Arguably, they are the same. They're the same output, but they do it in different ways. You can edit crops and stuff once you've made them. So if you've got them in presets, perhaps the P80 way is the better way, or the P80 Q8 way is better. But also, I can see scenarios where actually you want that crop to be part of a preset, a relative preset at least. If you're doing stuff with, if you're bringing in like a Resolume with left half, right half, and then overlays underneath it, and you want to put those on top, there might be a use case where you don't want to have it on an input, you want to have it on the layer. It all depends, really. All depends. That epoxy tracking's back on again. Okie dokie. Right, background layers. So yes, backgrounds have moved. So it used to be that you would click, if I do this on the P20 actually it'll make more sense. It used to be that to change the background on a layer, you would go to your background layer by clicking on it, and that was the only way to get to it. And then you would have to enable your background, and then you choose your image that you wanted to have on your background. So on the P10, P20, backgrounds can only be images. The background layer is the only layer that can be an image on a P10, P20. You can't put an image on a layer, or you can't put a still on a layer. It's only on that background layer, and that background layer can't move forward from the back. So your background layer is always behind everything else. You can't move it. Even with these buttons, they're grayed out. You can't move it forwards. It truly is a background layer, and it's truly only a still on the P10, P20. It is, however, scalable, so you can scale it. You can scale it out of aspect as well if you want to. So you can do that if you need to. But yes, you used to have to click here and then click over here to enable it, and then choose your image. It's now got its own background tab at the top here. There is also another tab behind here that's called logo. We'll come back to that. But yes, it's now up here, and you enable it and disable it, and then you can choose your source from the gallery. You can upload to the gallery here. You can edit and then delete from your gallery if you need to, but you can just literally drag and drop and change that to another image. So that's how backgrounds used to work and still work on the P10, P20. On the P80, there is now live backgrounds, and this is specifically the P80. It's not on the Q8. This is different. So in the programming, we can go to background, and we've got two options. We can have an image, or we can have a live background. And in live backgrounds, you basically go to edit, and then you create your background sets if you want over here. So I think, let me just check. I think this machine has got two 8K by 1Ks and a 1080p. So I can make a background with two 1080, or I can make a background that's 16K by 1K across a background. If I was doing this, I would do something silly like, let's say I was going into Brompton processing, because why not? So I'll set the... So Brompton processing on the SX40s has a width limit of 4K basically. So if I set these both to be split mode, which I think I already have, great. If I then go to my screen, add a new screen, and then on my screen I can add my outputs. So I've got my now 4 outputs, because when you go to a split, it's a left-right on the same canvas, or stitched together. If that makes sense. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make each of these outputs a custom resolution. I'm going to make each of them 8192. Sorry, I'm going to make each of them 4096 by 1080 at 50. Great. And then I'm going to stitch them together like so. So now I have a canvas size of 16K by 1K. You can see it just over here. So now if I go to my programming tab, I can go to my backgrounds. Let's get the right screen first. So screen 2, we'll turn screen 1 off. So yeah, screen 2, you can see my 16K by 1K canvas. That's over 4 connectors. I can go to my live backgrounds, I can edit, and then I can add. And what I can do here is I can drag my first 8K input onto my first screen, or first pair, I should say. When they're in split mode, you can't not have them across that boundary. So the whole of the split mode, so both connectors are treated as one connector for live backgrounds. And I can grab my other side and I can stick my other connector there. So this is in connector mode, which is annoyingly hidden underneath these notifications. So in connector mode, and then I've got my left half, right half of this 16K by 1K wall. So I click save. You have to click save. It saves it to a block here, and then I can go to my second one, for instance, and create a one that's just a connector. When it's in the screen mode. When it's in the screen mode, if my connector doesn't fill it, it just cuts it where the end of the input is, and I get black. The backgrounds have no scaling. There's no moving them around. They are top left first, and then it fills until it runs out. And if it doesn't fill, it just doesn't give you anything. So that's how that works. So yeah, and then to apply the live background, we need to go back. You have to click on this little back here to get back out of this. This is a bit of a quirk and it is a bit annoying. But once you've come out of that, you can then apply live background. If you unlock it first, you can apply live background and it will have your background behind everything else, and it's live. So that's how live backgrounds work on the P80. That's a new thing. That is layers for free, essentially. They added this. It didn't remove any... it doesn't eat into your 8 layers that you've got over the top. So you've got 8 layers over the top of a live background. And if, for instance, we were to go from this to this, as part of a take, down the bottom, let's do a take. It's a fade. It's part of that transition. So it's not a snap live background. It's a transitioned live background. So that's quite cool. This will not be coming to the Q8 in the same way. The Q8, when it gets its live background feature, will use resources, but there's nuance to how that works, and it's not out yet, so I can't really tell you more about it. Yeah. Right. If it's okay with you guys, I'm going to quickly grab 5 minutes and grab a drink because I've been going for an hour and a quarter. If you've got any more questions, put them in the chat and we'll come back and answer them. Right, I'm going to put the Big Back Bunny back on just for sort of 3-5 minutes. Let's turn the volume down a little bit. Right, there we go. Haha! Hello, I'm back. Hello, I'm down here in the left corner. Woo! Woo! Hello everyone. Right, I'm back. I see a couple more questions to come in. I want to circle back to the Mac edict question for the 3200 wide by 1200 tool. So certain resolutions below 4K wide do require an additional setting. So this is if it doesn't work, try it. But also, don't leave it on. So let me explain how this will work. So I'll jump back to the P20. So we have it's gone to sleep again. So we've got a Mac 1080p, and we've got an extended display like the main output. Okay, so I think I've currently got the extended set to like 8K or 7680, something like that. When it wakes up, test. Why is that not working? I don't know. But here's what we need to do. So first of all, we need to set it to custom. So 3200 by 1200. I'll leave it at 60. I'll turn the audio on. I'll click apply. Now this won't work. Okay. And then we can try this little button down here called Mac compatibility mode. Now this I tend not to use this. If I'm working in the 4 to 8K region, I don't need it. But if you are less than the 4K wide, this sometimes is very helpful. So, yeah, I've turned that on. You can see it's gone green. Great. I now have an input that's 3200 wide by 1200 tall at 60 Hz, 8-bit. Okay, so this is one of those ones where it's, okay, well, you try it and see. But whatever you do, do not leave this setting turned on and then start plugging PCs in. I've never had this problem, but I've heard of people having this problem where if Mac compatibility mode is turned on a HDMI connector, and this is, we're down a nuance road here. If it's turned on over a HDMI connector, the PC will blue screen, or it will reboot and go into its BIOS. So just be very wary about using this setting. If you don't need it, don't turn it on. You can try it. If it doesn't work, turn it off. Don't leave it on. It's off by default everywhere. So I hope that answers the question earlier or answers the question to the earlier. I hope that answers the question that we had earlier that I couldn't answer directly at the time. But this is how you get around that. There's a quirk to do with EDIDs and Mac support, so that's why this occurs. But yes, it's possible, and you just enable it and it will work. You just need to tick the extra button that I forgot to tick earlier. Okay. Right. Can I tell you anything about the VPU allocation stuff with the update? Yes. So the only box that has VPUs inside it, really, VPUs, is the Q8. So across the whole Pixelhue range, essentially the VPU processing is tied to the output connectors. Certainly in the P series, you've got a processing block that you can split in half. In the P20, in the P80, there is, it's bolted to those output connectors. You can't move it from the output connectors to the flex card, for instance, or to the SDIs. It's fixed. It can only be used in that way. The Q8 is a little bit different, and we can go into the sim and actually see this. So up till recently, each output card essentially had a VPU, tied to it, and each VPU had 8 possible layers. And if you have content on one side of a screen that's on one connector and another on another side, it would use one resource on each VPU. That's changed a little bit in terms of the 2.0 release. So you now have this VPU option here, and we can stack 2 VPUs together, like so. So rather than having 8 available layers, I now have 15 available layers. So it's the two VPUs bolted together minus a layer. And that's how it works. And I can do that again over here. So I can have this output card borrowing the VPU resources. When I do that though, you'll notice these cards go grayed out. So my output connectors on the second card don't work because all of those resources are sent to this first card. So there are use cases where you might want to do that. There are use cases where you might not want to do that. Just depends on how you program your shows, what your shows require. If you are doing large LED wall that's over multiple connectors, and you need a lot of sources that have chroma bordered, like cut and fill border around like a camera. So like I'm thinking like a round thing with like artwork that goes around it, camera behind it that needs a mask on it. So immediately you've chewed through 4 layers because you're doing cut and fill and then cut and fill. Unless you do a chroma key over the top, whatever. But let's assume you're using 4 layers. You then need a layer for your background because there's no live backgrounds yet in the Q8, and even when there is, they will use a resource. So we're already 5 or 6 layers used up, if you want, on this first card. And that doesn't take into account if I've got another screen on my second connector that also needs layers. So you have to be very careful about that. But obviously, now we can borrow them from the second VPU, drag them over to the first one. I've got 15 to play with over 4 outputs, rather than 16 over 8 outputs. It's the same amount of resources, less connectors. Well, it's slightly less resources over less connectors. But that's how VPU borrowing works in the Q8 from version 2 onwards. I hope that answers your question, Phil. If it doesn't, poke me and I will answer again. Is there a user key system for reusing pit positions? Absolutely. So we can do this on Livebox. I'll do this on the P20. In the programming section, over in preset, you have, layer preset. These are like user-defined keys or user keys in the barcode world. So you have your parameter store down here. So these are like layer memories in analog way as well. So for instance, I can have this one being the, let's select, or let's just say size, and I'm just going to call it size option 1 in capitals because, yeah, and then I can drag it over here, make it a different size, and then to apply it, you click, drag, drop onto the layer, and it will apply those settings to that layer. That is how that works. Richard? Yeah. Cool. Layer presets, Pixelhue. Yep. Okie dokie. Which is layer. Oh, yeah. Okay, great. VPU stuff on Q8 is very similar to analog way, right? No. So, prior to this update, absolutely not. There was no way that you could stack your VPUs. So in Barco, you've got the canvas link that means you can ripple from one into the second, and then if you're going over multiple frames, you can do stuff there. In analog way, yes, your VPU block, if you went over the first one, it would start eating into your next VPU in terms of layers. Essentially, each block was a 8x8 grid, so 8 dual links by 8 dual link layers, and then depending on your configuration of your canvas and your layer counts, you would need a second block potentially, and you could go wider. You can stack your blocks horizontally as well as vertically, and this is where regioning comes in the analog way world. As soon as you start having multiple VPUs on the same canvas space, your regioning becomes the only way to manage that. So you'd have essentially you'd have a left half regioned and a right half regioned, and the regions are based on the connectors, and basically you can tie a region to a VPU. You don't do it, the system does it internally, which means that those layers inputs on the cross matrix only appear on that region, so it can efficiently, more efficiently use the resources available. Let's put it that way. On this, they're not really like that. I can't, for instance, go wider than 2 VPUs, so I can only have a maximum of 15 layers. However, it is possible. You could use a cable to loop it back if you wanted to, but you can also, in the programming, have a screen. So I need another screen to be able to do this, I should say. So it's screen 2. I could make this my virtual screen. So I can add another screen. Let's just assume this is what I want to do. I can on my screen 2. And yeah, your resources are down here, guys, if you don't know it already. So on this screen, I've got on output card 3, I now have 15 resources. On output card 1, I have 15 resources. But I can put screen 2 onto screen 1. So I can, as far as I know, this adds a frame of delay. I've never tried it. But essentially now I do have 29 layers on my screen. So maybe a workaround, I don't know, but you can put screens on screens in the Q8. Yeah, in the P80, you can also put screens on screens, but you can also put the multi-viewer on the screen. So you can't do that in the... You can do that in the Q8 actually, but yes, you couldn't up till recently. You can now do that in the Q8. In the Q8, you need to do it by going to your first card, and your first card must be a certain type. So I'll have to shut this down and change this device. So if I change this back to the default card for a second, and then start it again, I'll show you how you can get multi-view on your available as a source. This is taking quite a while to load these sims in this this version I've got. So there's a new specific feature that if you don't know it's there, you don't know it's there. On your first input card, there is now an additional multi-view option. So I have to disable an input and then enable my multi-view down the bottom. Yeah, okay. And now when I go to my programming tab, in my screen, I have my multi-viewers. Okay, so it is now possible on the Q8 to get your multi-viewers on the screen. However, you have to chew up an input on specifically card 1, and it has to be a certain type of card. So, yes. Does that answer the VPU question in terms of how it works, where it's available, and how many layers you can possibly get? It kind of only really affects the Q8. The P80 doesn't have a movable VPU in that way. Okay, great. Super duper. Yeah, don't really have much more to talk about, to be honest. There's linking available. I can't actually show it because I only have one P80. But when it's working, I've actually got modules in, so it shows up as a link, but there's no device at the other end. So they go green when there's a link. There's no like additional options for the linking here. To get to the link stuff, you have to go up to settings, then link settings, and then you create a link, and then you'd have two devices here. You link them together. You then choose which sources on which box are available to the other box, and it's 8 sources in each direction. But everything is only really input sharing at the moment. So everything else is segregated. You can't put a screen on one box onto the screen on another box. You can't put a multi-view on one box onto the screen on another box, or vice versa. Hasn't quite got that far yet, and I don't know if it will. I hope that it will, but at the moment it's just input sharing, and it's 8 inputs each way. Okie dokie. So, do you guys all know that version 1.9 was released like 2 days ago? There's some fixes in there for stuff in Q8 mostly. But there is also a 2.0 beta available. So it is on a website, and this is the standard Pixelhue downloads. So you go software, choose your box over here, and you get your standard downloads. So you see they're all like 1.9 at the moment. And earlier on I mentioned about the numbering system of different boxes having different numbering system. So yeah, the firmware here, we've got 1.9 for the Q8, 1.1.2 for the P80, 1.7.1 for the P10, P20. So the numbering system is a little bit all over the place, but at least it always goes in one direction. There is also the version 2 beta. I will drop a link in the YouTube chat for you guys. I can't drop you a link in the chat because it is too long for me to send as a link. Charge this URL short. No. Why is everything capitals? There we go. Here we go. So that's a link to the version 2 beta. It is a beta. It's not recommended for use, but I've used the prior version to the beta, so the alpha you might call it, the demo version, Pixelhue call it. I've been using that for a while and not really had any problems with it. I've had actually 0 problems with it. I found a few things that I've interesting, but it's not. I've used it on a show and it was fine. So in general, that's you're not supposed to, but I have. Okie dokie. And what else is there to say? There is one other thing that's a new thing that's coming as part of the version 2, which is the web chat. So the web chat is not the web chat, the web GUI. So you need the IP address. So 195 is my IP address. Let's go to here. 192.168.0.195. Get rid of that bookmark. You need to not be HTTPS as far as I know. Yeah, I'm running the right firmware. No, that was not going to work. I can't remember what port it's on. But that's how you normally get to the web GUI, which it now does have. Yeah, I don't know why that's not working actually. I think that might just be, I don't know the port. I should know the port. Right. Version 2 Pixelflow has new features for PAT. Yes. My background. That will all work on the current firmware running on PAT. Yes. So I have downgraded PAT from the demo version that I've got running, the version 2 demo. I have downgraded to 1.1.2, which is the public version, and it was fine. Pixelflow worked fine, and then I've upgraded again since, and it was fine again. So yes, you can go forwards and backwards within reason. As far as I know, that's kind of always been true. There's always been a little bit of overlap, but if Pixelflow detects a box it can't talk to, it will tell you that you need to downgrade or upgrade. Yeah, and obviously with the web thing coming, the web GUI, you won't need to install Pixelflow because it's just hit the IP address and it's great. I need to know that port number actually. Let me just have a look on a different laptop. So let's go again. So 192.168, 198. I've got the IP address wrong. Classic. Here we go. There we go. There we go. Right. So let's get rid of this. You guys, yes. So this is now a website. You can see here's the stuff. You can change the skin if you want, make it black, more darker. But yeah, from here you can go into device exactly the same as you would in Pixelflow. Your programming tab is up there. The thumbnails work exactly the same. So you're seeing a screen recording of a Chrome browser that's showing the web GUI of the box behind me with its live sources. So yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty snappy. Yeah, I've done a show using this without realizing that I wasn't using Pixelflow. Yeah. But you can also, this is quite interesting, you can also control a different box as well. So I'm going to the IP address of my P80 and controlling my P20. So if you've got multiple on the network, you might want to think about some IP segregation between you. Otherwise, you can all control each other's boxes. If you're in the same subnet, that is. Right. Well, yeah. If there is, do you still need Pixelflow? Nope, you don't need Pixelflow installed to view the web GUI. So yeah, this will make Pixelflow kind of redundant, to be perfectly honest, because Webflow, if they ever call it that, will just be the way people access the box. Yeah, Pixelflow does have the simulator. So yeah, so you can't add a sim project to the live boxes. You also can't run a sim box and a live box and link them or anything like that. So if you're doing pre-prod or trying to work out whether a show fits or how it's going to work, you'll need the software installed to do that, or a box available. But you don't need, yeah, you don't need the Pixelflow software to run your show anymore. But obviously you can. It's actually a web browser underneath anyway, so you can. I forget how I got into it. There is like a way of getting into like in a web GUI mode. There's a way of getting into it. I can't remember what it is. But there is also an advanced mode as well that's available that gives you some extra features in terms of how Pixelflow works. That requires key combinations to get to it. Yeah, I've never needed to, but it does exist. I've seen it in a couple of manuals. Have I used the U5 controllers much? No. To be honest, I don't actually know anyone who's got one of the U5 controllers in the UK that isn't a distributor. I think most people, certainly in where I sit, in like the corporate first market, most people are companion on Stream Decks because interoperability with other things, and also that's what we know. It's very easy to integrate a whole show into 32 buttons or more. So, yeah, the U5 and U5 Pro both can do MIDI calls out, and there is some stuff to do with running Companion natively on the Surface as well, and using the buttons on the Surface as companion buttons. There is stuff in that arena. It does work, but I have not had the need to use one, nor have I got a client who's got one, and it wouldn't be something we would buy because companion Stream Decks. It's just a preferred operating method. Okie dokie. Right, well, it's 10 to 10. I had 2 hours available for this, so thanks very much for joining me. I'm going to call it a night. If you have any other questions, feel free to either email me or reach out in another way, whatever works for you. And yeah, I'll leave this up on the website up on YouTube for a while for people to have a look at. Okie dokie. Au revoir.